Mario, Astro Boy, Snoopy. Snoopy's not from there, but they really love Snoopy. There are so many names, if we're doing a Mount Rushmore, of just Japanese guys we could put on there. Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
Though he was sort of American because he was designed by a Japanese man, trying to think of what Americans would like. There's so many names we could throw out on a Japanese Mount Rushmore. However, we're not thinking of that. We're thinking specifically of rugby union.
Men's rugby union.
Men's rugby union.
Men's international rugby union.
So, our task for today, and we are joined very lovingly by Kazuki Himeno and
Fumiaki Tanaka.
They were made very lovingly by people that worked in a shop, a specific rugby shop in Japan. I bought them after a game in 2019. I've gone blank on which one. It was Fiji against Georgia.
Okay.
Fiji against Georgia.
I'm very jealous that you got to see rugby in Japan.
Oh,
because they love it there.
They do.
In a different way to everybody else. And I'm really excited. Look, we just had like a very, very brief, non-spoilery conversation off air just about how much we both love rugby in Japan and their approach to it and the players they've produced.
Japan and Fiji are the two nations who are most unspoiled, unfiltered from the kind of like Anglo influence. France a little bit, Italy a little bit as well, but obviously geographically they're closer, so they've got overlap and they played against them regularly. Where Japan and Fiji, they had this nation's kind of rugby culture spring up on their own. New Zealand had the same thing happen with the Maori culture that led into the All Black style of play. However, that got copied so quickly because they came over, beat everyone, and was like, holy shit, that's the way we should be playing rugby. Japan and Fiji have these like completely unique styles of play, and I love watching Japanese rugby. I love the way it sprang up completely independently.
It's like its own sport in a way.
Yeah,
Japanese rugby.
Yeah, and it's got just a long and bountiful history. And I think a lot of people kind of trace it back like no further than either their first World Cup appearance in '87, or than the 2015, 19, and
Brighton.
23.
Yeah,
exactly, like that history. And yet it does go back so far. You think about, obviously, rugby first coming into Japan, being brought up by a school teacher, tracking right through. And then, like, in the 70s and 80s, people don't talk about this, right? There was an enormous influx of people watching rugby in Japan. It became, like, the second most popular team sport in the country. Yeah. Like, it enormously blew up. Games started being televised. Like, Japan was the first country where they were televising club games, like, regularly, like, weekly fixtures being all televised. Japan has a huge place in rugby history. Like, so many of the things that we think of now as, like, oh, isn't it incredible that this country that's rugby mad did this first? Japan was doing them beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, yeah, we want to look at specifically the Japan men's national team. We'll look at the women down the road. We're splitting it off. We're looking at the team rather than the nation of Japan.
So we're going to, you know the format by now, pick our Mount Rushmore, our 4 faces that we will etch into that to represent the best of Japanese rugby history.
Yes.
May I request that I kick us off on this one?
Please.
Because instead of, in the previous 2, we've gone out and locked one in straight away. I instead want to chuck one out and kind of test the waters a little bit. Where do we stand on Eddie Jones as a part of this?
He would be on my Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
My Mount Rushmore. I can't say it. I'm so excited.
Mount Rushmore, mate.
My mate Rushmore.
Yes.
That we are now building somewhere in Kumamoto, outside the stadium, which is like an hour's drive from the town centre. I think that's where we're going to build it.
Yeah. Kumamoto sounds like a good rugby town.
They've got mountains in the hill, it's a lovely place.
A convenient place to put to etch Eddie Jones.
They've got that bear.
Big smug grin. Yeah.
They've got the bear. Is their mascot. I thought we could add something else as another tourist spot for them.
Okay.
So we're building it Kumamoto on the coast. I
was quite unconfident on that. I wrote his name down because I think he's somebody who's had one of the biggest influences on the Japanese style of play.
Absolutely.
And regardless of what his career has become in the latter years, I think that's quite unarguable considering 2015 and so on. You are much more confidently etching him in than I. So please kick us off. Talk about Eddie Jones.
So I've done that many times. I've spoken much about Eddie Jones.
Yeah.
But if we're to think about that Japanese style of play as we're talking about, right, which is extremely high tempo, which is moving the ball a lot, which is speed out the hands, and which is organised set plays, which is learning your role and almost like a theatre rehearsal, delivering on it.
At all times,
like clockwork.
disciplined. Yeah.
Right. that was a style of play that has been in Japanese rugby going back centuries, right? Going back since the dawn of the game in the country. That's been the way they played. You look at the earliest footage of them playing in the 50s, that's how they played. It was the same thing. You then get into the noughties, and it's the one time they go away from it. They start going, okay, this doesn't work anymore in professional rugby. And there's a lot of talk, if you listen to people who know Japanese rugby inside out, there's a lot of reverence for New Zealand in rugby culture in particular. And they looked to emulate New Zealand and look at power and look at the idea of passing the ball, like keeping it alive more rather than like reset, learn your lines, hit them, run. Eddie Jones comes in and goes, nah, mate, what are we doing here, mate? And rebirths it, builds Japanese rugby up from scratch back into what it always should have been, into this professionalised version of that strategy. He then, in doing so, also creates a fitness and a kind of drive and motivation that gets over a lot of the hang-ups they'd had for generations of losing to the bigger teams, gets them over that, and gets them to a place where they then go on and beat the Springboks, which people nowadays, right, you lose track of how big an upset that was. That was the equivalent of like Namibia going and beating the Springboks, right? Or Canada beating the Springboks.
Probably the biggest upset in rugby history.
Undoubtedly.
Men's or women's, international or club, anything.
Undoubtedly. It was enormous. It was monumental. Like, it was genuinely impossible to believe. The odds were like, one bookie had 1,000 to 1 odds, right? Yeah. And I had a friend afterwards say to me, why didn't you let us know about that 1,000 to 1 1 odds that we could have bet on? I was like, no, because it wouldn't happen.
It wasn't going to happen.
The All Blacks are playing Namibia next week. You can go and bet on Namibia to beat them next week. There's the same level of odds.
Yeah.
Like, that was where it was. Japan hadn't won a game since the 1991 World Cup. And then they come out and they create that. And so many of that is on Eddie Jones from both a point of view of them taking traditions and modernising them, but also him getting them into competitive place where they are today. Like, they are a Tier 1 nation largely because of what Eddie Jones has started doing in 2012.
Yeah. Eddie Jones as well, for context, is half Japanese. Yep. So his mother, Nell, is Japanese. So he was raised kind of understanding Japanese culture. And I think that, he's spoken on record before, but that was a big part of why he wanted to go back and coach Japan when he was already well established, was the assistant coach who helped the Springboks win the World Cup. Mm-hmm. He got to a World Cup final with Australia in 2003.
Coach Saracens.
He wanted to do something a bit different and coach Japan and give back to his family, which is something that really meant a lot to him. And as well as that, he had, as you mentioned, studied what Japanese rugby culture is like. It's something that I think Eddie Jones is really, really good at, is that whenever he goes to, and again, regardless of recent form, Eddie Jones is one of my heroes in rugby, coaching, because I think he's a genius in terms of the game, right? But he likes to look at a team and stereotype them and go, what makes this team good? Yeah. What characterises, what makes this rugby team what they are? And he did that with Japan.
He said his goal before his first game for England was to create the most English England team of all time.
Yeah. So with that, Eddie Jones was, as we've discussed many times on the channel, the inventor of the 2-phase or 3-phase set play. Mm-hmm. He was the inventor. He's credited as being the inventor of the 1-3-1, but I think that was
happening in New Zealand ahead of it. I think basically what he did was he laid the foundations that led to the 1-3-1. He wasn't actually the guy that.
However, the bit that is kind of inarguable is that he took it to its logical extreme with Japan, and he popularised it to the point where it wasn't just the 1-3-1. It was, we have a set role in everything we do. We're going from an edge break down on the right-hand side. We're going to play off 9, out the back, hit the pod coming off 10, right? They're going to crash it up. 10's going to come around the corner. We're going to run a hit and a boot off there. We're going to play to that edge. Brilliant. Off that, we'll play off 10. We'll crash up there. And then we'll go out the back of the next one. For example, right? There's something like that everybody had a role. They had a rehearsal for over 8, 9, 10 phases potentially, if they got that far. And when that worked in 2015, when it got Japan that far, and this is a Japanese team who were punching above their weight, everyone suddenly realised, oh my God, that team is so organised, we're going to do this. To the point which everyone started copying that in international rugby for the next 6 or 7 years. And not just in international rugby. I remember in my club having a professional coach come in and do that with us. Everybody was doing this because Eddie Jones took that to its logical extreme and got the best out of a smaller group of players.
I think the All Blacks in 2015 played a huge part in that as well.
They did, but I think there was a bit more improv jazz to them.
Sure. I think there's an element of it, right? One of the perks of the job in doing this for a long time, right, is I have seen the Japanese playbook from 2015. Like,
Yeah.
I have read that playbook. I've seen the actual, Eddie Jones' playbook for it, right? And every move was designed to have a version that could be ran off, if it was a line-out move, they had an adaptation to run it off a scrum, but also in open play, like if they needed that, right? Which, again, ahead of their time, but also buys into that very Japanese rugby idea of always everyone knowing the lines and knowing how to run it, and every move being run separately. Or like one of the famous tries in the 2015 Brighton Miracle game is a move designed to be run off a line out that they run off a scrum. Because they just knew how to adapt it and they'd prepared that and everything. So we've got Eddie Jones the contender. Should we move on to the next guy? I think there's someone you have to pair up with him when we're talking about the Brighton Miracle, and someone who I think is locked in. Whose face is already being etched into the waves of Yamamoto. Michael Leech.
Michael Leech, the greatest Japanese rugby player of all time. And some people will quite cynically go, oh, he's a New Zealander. Not anymore. Not anymore. He once was, but now he literally says, he's said for about 10 years now, he speaks Japanese better than he speaks English these days. He feels Japanese. He embodies the Japanese spirit.
He moved to Japan on his own when he was 13, maybe 14. And lived there on his own without his parents to take a rugby scholarship, and so fully bought into the culture. You can't help but when you are completely surrounded and you know nobody who speaks the same language, right? And so he fell completely into Japanese culture. There was a really lovely piece they did in 2019 on ITV where they had a few people in Japan talk about what Michael Leech means, and one of them said that genuinely he's been one of the most important things for us accepting overseas people as Japanese, because everyone views him in that way. No one views him as an outsider. And so he's very much viewed as like one of us, and it's this idea that like even if you weren't born in Japan, you can still be Japanese, and he's like what an important figure he was there. But then you also just look at him as a raw rugby player, and he is, as you say, like probably the greatest they've ever produced.
Honestly, like, if he'd stayed in New Zealand the whole time, it makes me wonder, would he have just been a Bunnings NPC journeyman for a while? And he went to Japan, he made his name and became a world-class player. And he's been the captain for Japan for a decade and a half now. Has
briefly had it handed to, elsewhere.
But all of the success that surrounded Japanese rugby in the last 15 odd years has had Michael Leech at the very heart of it. And even up to recently, their win in that first test series against Wales, he was the man of the match. He was still the guy who calmed everyone down, who was the centrepiece of it all. The 2023 Rugby World Cup.
It was absolutely
exactly.
Everywhere.
The 2023 World Cup, the game against Chile, where there was a bit of a fright at the start, where Japan started to panic a little bit. Rodrigo Fernandez scored a try, and then he clawed them back into it. And he has just, in every game he plays for Japan, A, worn his heart on his sleeve and seen it as a genuine privilege that he gets to do this again. But B, made sure the standard is right up at the All Blacks, the Springboks, the Wallabies, the best teams in the world that you could ever play against. He is one of the best players in the world. He has been for most of his international career, and he has not let anybody at his side dip below that standard. And I've just rarely seen a leader who's so infectious in the way that he brings everybody with him and is so selfless and careful in everything he does on a rugby pitch.
And so completely beloved by teammates and fans alike. And coaches, he's the hardest worker everywhere. You look at, there was a clip from a few years ago of him after a game, I think they played Samoa, and afterwards, as he was leaving the changing room, he was walking towards his car, someone put it in fast motion of him stopping and signing every fan's autograph and just like spending all that time and taking photos of everyone and being so committed. You look at the way that fans cheer "Reach" as he carries the ball any moment. One of the best moments for me, right, was I think it was Fiji. They were playing in a World Cup warm-up before 2019 or the PNC game, and they brought him off the bench on about 60 minutes. And they'd kind of fallen out the game. Japan had kind of like, I think it was a narrow, quite close game. Leech comes on and the energy from the crowd changes completely. There was such a roar that it completely rejuvenated Japan, and they came out and he then was brilliant and they go on and win the game. It leads then to Jamie Joseph, the coach at the time, benching him against Ireland because he knew they had that as a weapon because he's so beloved that they can bring him on. It'll completely change the energy in the whole place, right? And like I remember being at the airport, Kumamoto Airport, funny enough, to fly back to Tokyo the morning after they beaten Scotland to qualify for the knockouts for the first time ever. And they had a moment where they did like the only two stories on the news were there's a typhoon and holy shit, have you seen the rugby? And literally, it was just like they were going back and forth. And they did a 10-minute highlights package on the news where they had like the announcer, like the newsreader, like going through the highlights and discussing them. And there's a bit where Michael Leech just threw an offload and they went, Captain, reach! And there was someone sat there, looked up and went, reach! Alongside in the airport who was reading a
they
newspaper.
love him.
And like I don't know if there's a rugby player who's more widely beloved in their home nation than Michael Leach.
He's arguably the most talismanic player for a single individual nation that rugby's ever seen.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, I think he's the most nailed into a Mount Rushmore ever because every single metric that you could want somebody on a Mount Rushmore, he has it.
We're carving him out of marble.
Yes.
Like he's just locked in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
So Reach.
So I want to
in.
add in a few more players from that era who add in, you know, the Eddie Jones era and the 2015-19. Yeah. A couple of players that I think really deserve our consideration for this, okay? Shota Horie.
Yes.
Hooker. Phenomenal player.
What a player.
One of, honestly, the players who punched above his weight so hard. Incredible ball handler. Was compared to Brian O'Driscoll in the 2011 World Cup because he was just phenomenal throughout the back passes, behind his backdoor offloads, incredible line-out thrower as well, and really good at the nitty-gritty work, good kicking game, great hair.
Yeah, the best hair in the 2019 World Cup at least.
Yeah.
Incredible longevity as well, only retired last year, having been playing for Japan since 2009,
Legend.
I think.
Yeah.
He was one of the greats, one of the best hookers of the modern era, the professional era ever.
Yeah.
And the great thing about him, right, is a lot of hookers have adapted their game with age, right? And you think about when Jamie George came through, and he was seen as a pacey young hooker who was bringing something different, a bit of dynamism, a bit of explosiveness, and now he's the archetypal hooker, right? Ken Owens was like closer to like the second number 8 mold, Cannonball Ken, like him hard carrying.
Sheriff.
Then slowly became the archetypal hooker.
Yeah.
Shota Horie came through and was this all-time baller who was basically Brian O'Driscoll with incredible hair and a 2 on his back. And by the end of his career, he was basically Ma Nonu with a 2 on his back.
He just refused.
He remained the same player, right?
Yeah.
And he yet still did adapt his game with age. And all of the kind of the line out and the scrum and everything he was excellent at. But all the same, he kept the same philosophy and he played the same way right to the end.
Hell yeah.
You look at one of his last involvements on a rugby pitch was like popping up on the wing as the edge forward, throwing a dummy, going through, drawing a fullback and putting the winger through to make a break, which he eventually scored off. He then got called back, but like that was one of his last involvements on a rugby pitch, was popping up on the wing and acting as a 13.
Yeah, what a guy. We'll put a pin in Shota Horie as he's in our consideration, right? Fumiaki Tanaka. He's right here.
What a player.
Honestly, as scrum halves go, again, I'm obsessed with him. So quick and speedy. Both his pass and his speed of service were textbook. And also, in terms of rounding out his game, when nines had to become good kickers, right? Before that, he was a pretty pants kicker, right? And then by that point, he became one of the most just dependable kickers in international rugby.
Another guy who was universally beloved as well. You think about his time at the Highlanders.
The character Fumiaki Tanaka.
Yeah. My pet Fumi, him turning up in his pants when players were being interviewed.
Yeah.
Him just walking around being like a weird and endearing guy. He was so popular at the Highlanders, like unbelievably so.
He once did an interview where the interviewer tried to ask him a question in Japanese and he said he couldn't speak Japanese, he could only speak English.
He was superb. He was incredibly funny.
Yeah.
I love a great character, but also just a hell of a scrum half.
Yeah. And there was just his body language is kind of, he had all of these like little things that he would do, like ticks on a rugby pitch that he was really known for, which I really liked. He had this tradition when he came on where he like put his hands together and he'd nod. And I remember we went to a Japan game in the last World Cup and we saw him as a pundit and he was doing that to every fan who went past him and recognised him. Just because he knows what the fans want.
Absolutely.
He's a showman.
Absolutely. No, he was fantastic. I remember one of my lasting memories of him is he came off the bench for, I believe, a young Yutaka Nagare, who sadly is just retired, and I think is worth a very passing mention because he was a hell of a player as well. But he was on the bench for a game against the All Blacks right before the 2018 World Cup, or 2019 World Cup, I believe it was in 2018. And he came off the bench and he quick tapped every single penalty, even a turnover on his own line.
He loves it.
He came on, he played half an hour and he quick tapped every penalty. And like that was him. That was him to a T.
Love Fumi
No one
to
put
bits.
pace in the game like Fumiaki Tanaka.
Another one.
Yep.
Ayumu Goromaru.
Goromaru.
Centrepiece of the 2015 Brighton Miracle and the World Cup. Yeah.
The star.
They erected a statue of him.
Yeah.
Like, he was that good. He had, again, the iconic pose, kicking goals from, and he was an outstanding goal kicker.
Led to I think it was the Japanese minister of something, who started doing it to help him concentrate himself, like before meetings and stuff. Who spoke to him and was like, "Oh, that's really interesting," and then started doing it as like a opposed to centre himself.
What a cool guy!
Yeah, signed for Toulon. They started selling like subscriptions to Japan to watch the games. Brilliant goal kicker, like near flawless goal kicker, and positionally excellent. And the sort of player who doesn't really become a star that often.
Yeah.
But him being the goal kicker, him being so good in that Brighton Miracle game, really propelled him forward. Yeah. Hitoshi Ono.
Hitoshi Ono. I'm glad you said him.
Yeah.
He was the next on my list. Incredible player. He's one of those players, I'm really glad we've got this platform to talk about him now, because we always said, basically, in the years leading up to his retirement, like, it's a real shame there's nothing to document him as one of the greatest second rows of the professional era, which he kind of is.
Yeah.
Like, he was brilliant at, like, all of the nuts and bolts second row stuff, hitting breakdowns, right? He was... Honestly, he was a brute at the breakdown. Brilliant at the line-out. Like, he was a great line-out caller as well. That was something that he really liked in his game. And again, bring the whole rehearsal aspect of it. He was outstanding at all of that. And just a really good ball player. So underrated in the wide channels.
He was a firefighter for a long time.
Yes,
and then it took a long time for him to eventually accept just being a professional rugby player. He did both alongside.
Yeah.
And he played to the top level in Japan and played internationally, whilst everyone else alongside him was just a rugby player, but was also fighting fires alongside. And then for a long time, even when he became professional, remained on call in case they needed extra firefighters there.
What a dude.
And then eventually retired to focus on his firefighting.
Hell of a
99
goatee
caps
as well on him.
And his long hair. He always looked about 58.
Yeah.
Which sort of guy who will look the same age when he's 106.
Dude's nails.
Yeah.
Honestly, what a player.
Just like an absolutely brilliant player.
I'm obsessed with him. He's so good.
The other second row he's so often partnered with, the most underrated player of the professional era, Luke Thompson.
Yeah. I constantly say this theory. This is the hill I will die on. He's the most underrated rugby player of all time. Like that is my opinion.
think he's the most underrated player of the professional era.
Yeah, fair. All time is probably a bit strong when I've never watched amateur rugby live. You know? I've never watched that week by week. But yeah, honestly, Luke Thompson is revolutionary in terms of what second row does nowadays. In terms of as a link man, he always played in the middle of that 1-3-3-1, and he was outstanding at it. In terms of running dummy lines, he was outstanding at lifting the ball up to people out the back or on the tip-on line, and also as a carrier, he was phenomenal. What really cemented this harder for me was watching back the 2011 and 2007 World Cups and going, oh no, he was always this good.
He was always doing
It wasn't just a 2015 and 19
It wasn't
thing.
Eddie Jones necessarily changed him as a player.
Yeah.
It was that he got the best out of a guy who was always doing this, who was always that dynamic, who was always that thinking about the game in that way. I genuinely think he was a fly-off trap in a lock's body.
Yeah.
And so some of the things he could do were insane.
Yeah.
And not even in the way someone like Richie Gray, when he was younger, would have these big breaks or big flamboyant moments. It was tiny things like him just adjusting the line he was running, like just as a turning up and running a dummy line, him going okay, we're playing wide, so I'll just come in and just run a short line to shorten up the defence. The way he was always thinking about the game, he's one of the most intelligent footballers for a second row you've ever seen.
Yeah. 10 years prior, he could have played in the centres.
Yeah.
Honestly. The guy was incredible. I'm obsessed with him once again. I'm saying that a lot here. One more from that kind of era, let's say. A legendary Japan captain. And, another absolute, dynamite player in the physical areas of the sport, Takashi Kikatani.
Mate, what a player. What a player. We mentioned on the Australia episode Eddie Jones' quote about George Smith being covered in spiders. And the thing you don't mention, people bring that up about George Smith all the time, right? They don't bring up the context, which is he's talking about Takeshi Kikatani. And he was saying he's the only player I've seen since who run, especially in Japan, who runs he's covered in spiders, who people are afraid to tackle him. And he said that was kind of his USP in the league when they saw him play in Japan League One, the top league as it was at the time. And no one tackled him. People were afraid of tackling him, less because he was a huge man. He was a big guy.
Yeah.
But like there were bigger players in that league because he ran with this kind of fury and he had an aura about him. And he
did.
brought that to every game he played for Japan. And you
Aura's a
saw
good
him, he
word,
carried the ball in a way like Lawrence Delalio was a bit like this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In that he kind of had an energy and an aura about him that completely changed the prospect of him as a rugby player.
Yeah.
Like he was so much more than the sum of his parts.
Or a Dwayne Vermeulen.
Yeah,
Like one
yeah,
of
yeah.
those type of players. And he was a great captain as
was.
well for
He
Japan.
was.
And he was the captain who saw in Michael Leech,
Yeah.
when he was first coming in. And yeah, I think it's going to be really tough narrowing these down because I think we've got probably 2 more names I can think of.
I want to throw out Kazuki Meno as well as an honorable
Yes.
mention. I think he probably won't make it, but one of my favourite players.
Yeah.
I think truly in the kind of post Brighton Miracle era, the one truly world-class player Japan have produced.
Yeah.
He is one of the best rugby players of the last decade. Can do literally everything in the back row and so robust in all 3 positions. A phenomenal carrier, brilliant at the breakdown. I still hold he was the best player in the pool stage of the 2019 World Cup.
Yeah.
I thought he was unbelievable. So
Crazy
I
that
want to
he's
throw him
30
out.
now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It feels like he's still this young guy who just is bulletproof.
Well, because he's been stuck with these injuries for the last few years.
Yeah.
And I really hope he gets a chance to kick on, and potentially he could play for a long time. He's also become a Twitch streamer in the last few years.
Yeah.
And streamed himself playing the last Resident Evil game in full, for anyone that wants to look for that.
Kazuki Himeno genuinely built different. Like
Yeah.
plays like he's got armour on him.
Undoubtedly,
like, he
yeah.
does not scar, despite the fact he's been injured for a while. But you know what I mean? Like the way he plays is just so fearless. Okay, so the elephant in the room is Japan hold a world rugby record which has been untouched for a long, long time
For almost
now.
20 years now.
Yeah, and that is in the form of their ex-winger, Daisuke Ohata, who is the all-time top try scorer in the history of men's international rugby.
You have to have him in.
You have to have
You
him
have
in.
to have Tatsuki Ohata in.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously, he ran a lot of those tries against teams like the UAE, like South Korea, so on, and that's often the thing used to discredit him. He said it himself. He said it feels wrong that I'm the top try scorer over when he broke David Campese's record. He said like it should be Campese. And yet he can't help it. He scored more tries, right?
Yeah.
But he was one of the great finishers. You look at him when he did play against bigger teams, and he had an unbelievable strike rate, right?
Yeah.
Scored 2 tries against Scotland, missed the 2007 World Cup with injury, but had been up until then, like, on this phenomenal streak of like scoring against Wales, scoring against Italy.
Yeah.
Basically, anytime he played against a big team, he would score against them. He would stand up, he'd have a moment where he did that. He could finish tries in basically any single way. He had that little chip and chase. He had the kick along. He was incredibly fast. He was a great technical finisher.
Yeah.
He ran great support lines. Everything you want from a winger in terms of that ability to score tries, he had.
The sad thing is, we have seen so little tape of Daisuke Ohata, which means 2 things, right? We need to hurry up and do a podcast on a World Cup he played in. And secondly, Andrew Ford, if you're watching, mate, I need a favour from you. But whenever you watch any of the tries he's scored that
Yeah.
are online or whatever, if you look up a game that he scored in, go for a try there, which, believe me, we have both done, right? They're all worldies or like
Yeah.
incredible technical finishes and stuff. And yeah, the guy was honestly rapid and amazing to watch. Ohata's inclusion, I think he's competing for the same spot as Hirotoki Onozawa, who
I
was
was gonna
also
mention, so-
in the top. Like I think he was briefly like 5th or 6th top try scorer of all
I think
time.
he's in the top 10.
Yeah,
still hanging out
yeah.
there.
I will verify it on screen now. However, that guy is an incredible finisher
Yeah,
as well.
scored against the All Blacks,
Yeah.
most famously.
Yeah, a brilliant interception try in 2011. And yeah, honestly, unbelievable finisher. I think he would have been like probably etched in if not for the fact Ohata has that record.
Yeah. Well, you've got a few in that spot, haven't you? You've got more recently, you've got Kenki Fukuoka,
Oh, mate.
one of the most entertaining players I've ever seen.
What a
Loved
player.
him. Such a shame the pandemic happened purely and only because it meant that he went off to become a doctor instead of playing rugby.
It was the
for
worst
longer.
thing that happened.
Yeah,
as a
it was the worst
consequence.
element of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
You also had a few others beyond that. Kotaro Mashishima,
Yeah. What a
incredibly
player.
balanced, brilliant player. Love watching that guy.
Yeah.
Yoshi Fujita,
Yes.
who brilliant player, holds a world record for the most tries by a teenager. Scored 11 test tries before turning 20.
mental.
Went off and played sevens, and I think spent a lot of his best rugby was for the sevens team, right?
Yeah.
In his sort of later 20s. So I think that kind of knocks points off him, but he could have been one of these guys. They've always produced great wingers.
I think there's probably one more name
There's
we
one
talk
more
about,
name,
and I'm going to let you introduce
They
this
are
guy.
on my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
They are.
I thought there would be.
They are the second safest name after Michael Leech. Right, they're right up there. Seiji Harao.
Yes.
Let's talk about Seiji Harao for half an hour.
Mr. Rugby.
As he was known, Mr. Rugby, the before Leech most popular player in Japan of all time. A Japanese journalist said that it wasn't until being in the UK in the 90s and seeing David Beckham that he saw again the level of sensation towards an athlete there was towards Seiji Harao in Japan at the time. Rugby was a growing sport, right? It was doing pretty well. And along came this guy who was a baller, who was the best player Japan had ever seen by such a margin, right? He was a fly half. He was the centerpiece of everything. He had such time and vision on the ball. His ability to put other people into space, but also to open up for himself. His kicking, both for goal, but also positionally and chip kicks and so on.
As well.
He was so balanced as well.
And
he
defensively
had everything.
great.
Yeah.
Really solid as a fly half or centre.
He had everything. And if he was playing for a better team, he would be considered one of the greatest fly halves of all time.
Yeah.
And in Japan he was. And he was a huge part of what I was saying about that period in the 80s of rugby exploding in popularity in Japan. Because suddenly you had this guy who was incredibly handsome come along. He was often compared to movie stars and stuff. Incredibly handsome, absolute baller, the greatest player your country's ever seen.
And above all, incredibly humble.
Yeah.
Like, that was what he was known for, was sheer humility, and just took everything in his stride. And what was really amazing about watching him play when we watched the 87 tournament was he would make the most incredible line break and would be so unshowy about it, would just get up and just go, brilliant, let's just do that again in a moment, and wouldn't try and show off whatsoever.
So he went over in the height of his fame. He went to spend a year in England, a year in London, basically to get away from it all because it became incredibly overwhelming for him.
Wow.
This level of fame that he'd accrued.
As a rugby player.
So, he was a huge part in the growth of the game in Japan, right? He went over to London. He went to Richmond as the closest rugby club to where he was living. He went, hi, I don't really speak English. Can I get a game, please? So they went, sure, put him in the fourths. He tore it up to such a degree, and then they found out he played for Japan. They moved him straight up to the first for his second game.
Fucking yeah.
Yeah. They moved him straight up to the first, and he was then their player of the season for the season he was there.
No way.
When he was brought in as a fourth player at the start of the season.
That's phenomenal.
So moved right up to the top division and was Richmond Player of the Year that year. And I think they finished
to
third in
watch
the Premiership
that
that year.
fourth game back,
I know.
where Japan's greatest player ever at that time just came in and would have ripped it up. That poor opposition.
Yeah, they had no idea who he was. He just turned up. He was a kid who couldn't really speak English.
That's
He was 22, 23. I think he might have been slightly older, but he was young anyway.
Yeah. Bit more lore on Seiji Harao. Went to the 1987 World Cup as their fly-half, was their best player by a distance. Went to the 1991 tournament as their captain. Was really, really great in that as well, by all accounts. I've not watched it, but I'm sure it was. Retired for 3.5 years and then decided I quite miss it actually, and Japan probably need me. Going to come back for the 1995 tournament and was renowned again as their best player.
Yeah.
Then actually retired and then decided he missed rugby, so came back and coached them to the 99 tournament. And the guy just couldn't stay away from it. He sadly passed away in 2016, aged only 53, which is horrible.
Cancer, his first diagnosed in the early noughties. Managed to kind of fight for 10 years. Thereabouts. And then,
a true, genuine inspiration and star of Japanese rugby. The star of Japanese rugby.
Continued to pop up on TV and things for a long time afterwards.
Yeah. Loved rugby. I love the name Mr. Rugby for him. It's clearly, obviously, it's very, the first time that they associated something with rugby, so they just gave him that. But, it just works. It just works.
And, to watch him as a player alone, even without knowing all the context, just watching him in the 87 World Cup and going this kid is special. This kid is good, man. He's everything I want from a fly half. He's the dream fly half.
You were obsessing with him when we did the podcast on that before you knew any of the lore.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So, back to our Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
Leech is on there.
Leech is on there.
Ohata, he's got to be on there, hasn't he?
He's
got to be. And I can't turn away Mr. Rugby.
No.
That Harao story, it's romantic.
It is.
I want to keep Seiji Harao in there. And again, in terms of just the legacy that he has, he deserves to be in there. So the 4th spot, you're leaning Eddie Jones.
I am.
Right? I am quite torn on this.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Luke Thompson, as you know. Like,
Yes.
But how much of that is personal bias, you know? And I think if that's what I'm weighing up, right? As much as like Luke Thompson is an all-time great, right? As far as second rows goes, an all-time great as far as I'm concerned. Would you agree with that?
I think look, I will throw out the thing again. Like I think he's one of the most underrated players of all time.
Yeah.
I do, however, question whether, if we're thinking people that have had the greatest impact on Japanese rugby, is he that guy?
I think in terms of impact, if they're competing for the spot of impact, the splash that they've had, I think you've got to go Eddie Jones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm glad that you had the same school of thought as me as there around Eddie, but I think we've just built our Japanese Mount Rushmore.
I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Are Fumi and Kazuki happy with it? Kazuki Fumi does his nod.
Hi. Okay. Construction work begins in Kumamoto in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We'll see you there.